William the Conkerer. Chapter 1. William loved conkers. He loved collecting conkers, he loved preparing conkers, but most of all, he absolutely loved playing conkers. Each year, when autumn came, and the large, soft green leaves of the horse-chestnut trees turned crisp, yellow, and golden, William would take a walk to his local woods and scour the ground, looking for his treasures. He would always wait for the conkers to fall naturally from the trees, resisting the urge to take aim and throw sticks up into the branches to knock the shells down. He did this not only to avoid hurting the tree, but also to ensure that the conkers were mature and ready. He would often gaze up longingly at the high branches, seeking out the largest of the shells. Then he would mark the spot where he expected them to fall, telling himself, "Have patience, William. They will fall when they are ready. Come back again tomorrow." To William, each conker he found was special. Every time he opened up the spiky green shells to reveal the shiny brown seed inside was a delight. To lay eyes upon what no one else had ever seen before was truly a magical feeling. He collected conkers of all shapes and sizes, some with straight edges, some almost perfectly round, some lighter, some darker, some a bit knobbly or wibbly wobbly. To William, all were individual, all were perfect. Once William had filled his pockets, taking only as many conkers as he needed, he would go home and then place his finds in a line on his bedroom floor. He would give his conkers names: Battle Axe, Hammer Shock, Smasher. Then he would prepare his harvest for battle. People may tell you many different ways to best prepare a conker. Some might say you should bake them in the oven. Others might suggest you pickle them in vinegar or paint them with nail varnish. William preferred to just hold them tightly in his hands, close his eyes, and imagine them being as hard as stone or as powerful as the sun. William would carefully pierce the shells, using a large old knitting needle from his mother's sewing box. Next, using a ruler, he would measure out the best length of string, or as William preferred to use, the lace from his old pair of trainers. Then he would spend hours practicing in his back garden. He would shuffle his feet this way and that, adjusting his pose as if he were a boxer in the ring. Using a protractor, he would make precise mathematical calculations of various angles to ensure the heftiest strike. Chapter 2. One day in spring, when William was 9 years old, a poster appeared on the school notice board. Conker Championships this autumn. Trophy and £100 cash, first prize. Entry free. To say William was excited was a great understatement. In fact, he was instantly most desperate to take part. That afternoon, William made his way home from school, picturing himself proudly holding the winner's trophy aloft. Happily, he whistled along his way, conversing with the birds which nestled in the branches of the blossom-filled trees. Then, passing through the park, he felt a familiar small lump beneath his footstep. Bending down, he brushed away the long damp grass to reveal something quite special. Gleaming in the April sunshine, there lay a conker, round and large, bright shining brown and polished to perfection. William carefully removed it from the ground, and to further his surprise, he saw growing from the conker's side a vibrant green shoot. Almost better than holding the trophy itself, William cradled his find all the way back home. "But whatever shall I call you?" he wondered to himself as he gazed upon his most precious treasure. As if the conker were a delicate newborn baby, William carefully laid it down on the flower bed outside his bedroom window. He then dusted it with a light blanket of soil and sprinkled a soft shower of water upon it. "Grow strong and tall, my true love," he whispered as he gently patted the soil, "and one day your high branches will grow seeds of their own." The next morning after breakfast, William rushed out into the garden to examine his find. To his surprise, the conker had grown. In fact, you could quite simply say, that which was once a conker was now no longer a conker at all. It was now a small tree. William stood before the flower bed with his eyes wide open, agog and aghast. That day at school, William could hardly concentrate on his lessons. He spent both the morning and lunch breaks looking at the poster and then practicing his aim and coordination in the playground. When at last the bell rang for the end of the school day, William dashed out of the school gates and hurriedly made his way home. Arriving at the flower bed, he saw that the tree had grown further still. It now stood just short of the living room window, and sticky leaf buds had begun to sprout from the branch stems. William knelt down beside the sapling and delicately patted the soil. "How beautiful you have grown," he whispered proudly to his true love, with wonder in his heart. Every day over the next months, in the morning, in the afternoon, and then last thing at night, William would visit his tree. He would talk to it and tell it tales, as if it were his best friend. He would water it when it was dry and place horse manure he gathered from the local stables at the roots for extra nourishment. The tree grew and grew, almost visibly taller and stronger each day. Soon the branches were so high that William could reach out of his bedroom window and almost touch them. The last day of school before the summer holidays arrived. It was a sunny July morning. William ate his breakfast cereal looking out of the window at his tree. The large green leaves swayed lightly from side to side, as if waving at him in the gentle breeze. William wiped his sleeve across his mouth, smiled and waved back. After breakfast, he tidied away the dishes, picked up his school bag and lunchbox, then left the house. Saying goodbye to his tree, he glanced up into the branches to see something most wonderful and amazing. Overnight, several small green shells had appeared. William's eyes opened wider than they had ever been before. He felt as if all his birthdays had arrived at once. The last day of school, the best day of school, he smiled to himself as he closed the squeaky garden gate behind him. The last day of school passed with William mostly playing games and watching films. When the final bell rang, William said goodbye to his teachers and friends and made his way home. The small conkers were now the size of acorns. During the hot days of the summer, William would always ensure that his tree had enough water, food, and of course, company. When the sun was too hot, William would sit on a blanket in the shade of his tree. He would lay back and look up at the branches and the leaves and the conkers. He would read books, eat a picnic lunch, throw and catch a ball, all within the ever-growing ring of shade. Chapter 3. In August, William and his family were to take 2 weeks' holiday to Cornwall. When the day came, William was very sad. It was as if his heart were being torn in two. He really didn't want to go. The car was packed with camping gear and bags full of clothes and food. There were kites, buckets and spades, beach balls, and picnic baskets. William looked longingly out of his window, waving goodbye to his tree as the car left the driveway. He had a lump in his throat and tears were welling in his eyes. "You can't watch over your tree forever," William's mother said soothingly from the front passenger seat, looking back at her children. "One day you'll have to let it grow all by itself." All in all, William must admit, the holiday was great fun. The family spent hours lazing on the beach, playing games, eating sandy sandwiches and ice creams, and swimming in the sea, which was always a bit cold to begin with, but fine once you were in. They explored old castles, which were nestled along the high, jagged cliffs. They took a trip on an old steam train, and they visited quirky souvenir shops selling crystals and large seashells, which made the sound of the sea when you put them up to your ear. Each night, before William drifted off to sleep on the noisy air mattress bed, he would say goodnight to his true love. He would imagine himself standing before his tree and lovingly gazing up at its branches. Even though they were far apart, in his heart he felt they were still close together. The 2 weeks passed quickly by, and soon the family were packed up and heading home. When the car finally pulled into the driveway and had parked, William threw his door open and raced across the grass. The tree stood still and strong in the flower bed. The leaves had ever so slightly begun to turn brown at the edges, and the conkers, they were now as big as golf balls. School began again in September with new books, new teachers, and new homework. All through that month, William intently watched his conkers growing, the shells swelling ever larger, almost fit to burst. Soon they'll be ready, William thought. October arrived. It was a week before the competition. William's excitement was at breaking point. The conkers looked like they were ready to fall at any moment, but even though the ground in the woods was littered with conkers, those in the garden still hung on tightly to their stalks and branches. William had been back and forth to the woods, practicing his game endlessly beneath the golden leaves of his tree. He had even selected the conkers he would want to take to the competition, but his one desire was to compete with those grown in his own garden, from his own tree. The day before the competition, William longingly glanced up at the branches of his tree as he left the house. The conkers had finally burst through their shells, and as if they were sets of large brown eyes peering through spiky green eyelids, they gazed down upon him. William made his way to school with a step and a skip in his heart. Surely they will be waiting for me on the grass when I arrive home, he thought. But after school, returning home, he found they still hung tightly to the branches. For William, it had felt worse than waiting for Christmas, but finally the day of the competition arrived. William ate his breakfast eagerly, looking out of the kitchen window. The weather was still and calm. The leaves of the trees hardly moved at all. After breakfast, William ventured out into the garden with an anxious expectation. The conkers had still not fallen. William knelt down and picked up a stick from the grass. The temptation to throw the stick into the branches to try and knock the conkers down was almost too much to bear. Perhaps I could try and just give them a little poke, he thought. But, as desperate as he was, he dare not. With a heavy heart, William returned to his bedroom and collected the conkers from his favourite tree in the woods. Almost with tears in his eyes, William slung his bag over his shoulder and left the house. As he passed by his tree, a sudden and unexpected gust of wind blew. There was a soft thud behind him, then two more, then another two, and then one final thud, clearer and slightly louder than all the rest. William turned around excitedly, and there, behind him, he saw 6 of the largest and most perfect conkers he had ever seen before. He raced back into the house to fetch his mother's knitting needle. The conkers were ready at last. Chapter 4. On the way to the competition, William became anxious. William's father looked across at him from the driving seat. The tension in the car was almost tangible. "Have confidence," said William's father. "There'll be no one there who's practiced as much or come more prepared for this competition than you." Once the car had parked, with trembling hands, William carefully pierced the shells of his conkers. Intently he examined each one, looking for any imperfections. Then, once he was satisfied, he held each one in his hands in turn, and with his eyes closed, waited until a name for it popped into his mind. Then he placed them in the half-dozen egg box which he had specially put by and decorated for the competition. Stalls selling all types of conker-themed merchandise were scattered about the playing field. Conker cakes, conker clothing, conker ornaments. Some stalls even sold jewellery made from conkers. People of all ages roamed about. Some were wearing conker necklaces, others had decorated their hats with conkers, others were wearing conker t-shirts or waving conker flags. "The competition will take place over 6 rounds, announced the organizer as a large crowd gathered around. 64 players to begin with, then 32, then the last 16. The quarterfinals, then the semi-finals, and then the last remaining 2 competitors will battle it out in the final for first place, the trophy, and the prize money." Here the organizer pointed at the large golden trophy by his side. William's eyes lit up. "Woo!" went the crowd. "Players will stand 1 meter apart," the organizer continued. "Each will take 3 strikes against their opponent before alternating. The winner of each round will then proceed on to the next. A new conker is to be used for each round. The first player to take strike shall be decided by the flip of a coin," the organizer concluded. The players gathered round, lots were drawn, and the competition was underway. William's first opponent was a smartly dressed elderly gentleman who wore a red hat decorated with conkers, with 3 long pheasant tail feathers poking out from the side. The old man told William of all the fun he had climbing trees, collecting and then playing conkers when he was a boy. "That was all a long time ago now," the old man chuckled, "long before you were even born." His stories were great fun to listen to, and they helped settle William's nerves. As funny as the old man was, his eyesight wasn't that great, and he shook a little and kept missing his shots. After only 9 shots, Juggernaut had cracked his opponent's conker, and then, when the old man did actually manage to make a good contact shot, his conker broke to bits and scattered all over the ground. "Oh well, never mind," sighed the old man. "It was fun while it lasted." Next, William played against a young man who looked like a bodybuilder. His arm muscles were almost twice the size of William's waist. William lost the coin toss and nervously held his arm outstretched, Jumbo dangling at the end of his shoelace. His opponent took a thundering swing and missed. Then he missed again, and with his 3rd strike he made contact. "He's certainly got the power," thought William, "but his technique is all wrong." William lined up Jumbo. 3 shots, 3 direct hits. The battle continued. William slowly but surely chipped away for victory, whilst his opponent was ever trying for that one ferocious and victorious shot. After 4 rounds of play, Jumbo was still holding strong, whilst his opponent had a large crack running all the way from top to bottom. With one final well-placed, well-calculated swing, William had won again. The young man looked down in disbelief and shrugged his massive shoulders. "I suppose it is a long time since I last played," he said. "Good luck, kid," he offered as the two shook hands. William's next opponent was an incredibly tall and thin lady who wore a long black coat and high heels. She kept losing her balance every time she took a shot, and William was more than a little concerned that she would topple over and fall on top of him. The game ended with William placing a perfect strike. The lady's conker shattered all over the ground. The next battle was the quarterfinals. For this, William was drawn against Annabel, one of his best friends from school and a fellow conker enthusiast. William and Annabel had often discussed tactics and strategy, and he was somewhat saddened when the mighty Jupiter sent Annabel's conker crashing to the ground. "There's no one else I'd rather lose to than you, William," said Annabel, gracious in her defeat. William was through to the semi-finals. He threaded his trusty shoelace through Gladiator, and after winning the coin toss, made his way to the arena. He'd managed to watch the last game of his next opponent, and he was impressed by his technique. His stance, length of string, and angle of strike were as close to perfect as William had seen. This would be his toughest challenge yet. The 2 opponents faced each other 1 meter apart, and battle commenced. William started with 3 solid strikes, equally matched by his opponent. For 5 rounds, hefty blow followed hefty blow, with neither conker looking likely to crack or crumble at any time. Then, as William made ready to strike, He noticed a small white spot on the side of his opponent's conker. He has a strong game, William thought to himself, but could impatience be his downfall? William squinted one eye, and with a deft shot, Gladiator came crashing down directly onto the soft spot. William's opponent examined his conker in disbelief. A small crack had appeared in the shell. Another exact strike caused the small crack to grow to a gaping split. Then, with a triumphant whack, William was once more victorious and through to the final. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?" called out the competition organizer as a crowd gathered round. "Now comes the moment we've all been waiting for, the final. On my left, William, a local boy with a great talent, and on my right, the mighty Arnold, who's travelled to us all the way from California. William has saved his biggest and best conker till last, Valentine, named due to the markings on its side, which resembled the shape of a heart. Arnold smiled across the 1-meter gap at William. "Meet the Terminator," he grinned. The coin toss was won by Arnold, and the final battle commenced. For the first time in the competition, William felt fear. Arnold was possibly the biggest man he had ever seen. With his rippling muscles and strong jawline, he looked more like a machine than a man. William trembled as he held his arm outstretched, Valentine dangling at his side. Then, wham! A great shot of lightning struck through William's arm as the Terminator came crashing down with tremendous force. William watched in disbelief as Valentine swung and circled back and forth, recoiling from the blow. Arnold steadied his target as William braced himself for another blow. Holding his arm perfectly still, William closed his eyes as, wham! Another electric shock passed through his body. "Dare I even open my eyes?" thought William, afraid of the damage he might discover. Slowly he raised his eyelids. Valentine swung before him, unblemished by the assault. William defiantly gazed up at Arnold as the third blow struck. Again his arm shook, but Valentine remained firm. Next it was William's turn to strike. It was like drawing a dot-to-dot picture from point A to point B. William could almost see the line of trajectory. With all his might he took aim and fired. Valentine sped through the air and came crashing down on her opponent with all her might. The crowd gasped. What a strike! Arnold looked down at the Terminator, shocked by the power concealed within William's arm. William gave another strike, sensing his opponent was taken aback. Down came his third strike, a stunned look passing across Arnold's eyes. The crowd closed the circle. This truly was a match of champions. 2 further rounds followed, equally matched, equally brutal, neither player nor conker conceding to their opponent. Again, it was Arnold's turn. William braced his arm, making ready for strike number 10. Whack! Down came the most ferocious shot yet. Could it be that Arnold is just warming up, thought William? Or is it that my arm is beginning to fail? Valentine swung in a perfect loop suffering from the cruel blow. William examined his conquer. Brave Valentine. A small crack had appeared on the shell. For an instant William's breath faltered. He swallowed in disbelief. Arnold gave a grin, kissed the Terminator, and then chuckled to himself as he prepared for his next strike. A misjudgment. Valentine suffered a glancing blow which sent the conker into a violent spin. Arnold took aim again and fired the last of his 3 strikes. Again a direct hit, but thankfully this time a slight loss in power. William cradled Valentine in his hands. The small crack had grown deeper, wider, and longer. William took aim and swung Valentine with all his might. A powerful shot landed plumb on his opponent. Arnold's eyes opened wide as the Terminator looped before him. A gaping wound had appeared. Now both conkers were battle-scarred. Another powerful blow by William, and the players took their conkers in hand, assessing the damage. Both conkers now bore deep wounds. The crowd and both players knew the next shot was to be the final blow. William took a deep breath. All those hours of practice rested on this one moment. He drew back his conker, then, holding his breath, he took aim. Closing his eyes, he let Valentine fly. The power flowed through his arm. He felt the contact. The crowd gasped as the sound of falling fragments pattered on the ground. William slowly opened his eyes, and there before him swung Valentine, victorious. He had won. Chapter 5. A few days later, William learnt that the old man he had played against in the first round of the competition had sadly passed away. In memory of the old man, and as thanks for his funny stories and for settling his nerves, William chose to donate his prize money to charity. On learning of his generous gift, the family of the man was so taken aback and thankful to William that they gave him the old man's favourite 3-feathered hat, which he always loved to wear whenever he played conkers. This was now William's favourite hat, and he wore it almost all of the time, but especially when he played and practiced conkers in the garden beneath his tree. A week later, at breakfast time, William was sitting at the kitchen table finishing his cereal when his mother excitedly handed him the local newspaper. William's picture was featured on the front page. In one hand, William held the trophy aloft, whilst in the other, he proudly held his winning conker. "Valentine wins," the headline read in large font. After reading the article, William lovingly gazed out of the window as the crisp brown leaves of his beloved tree fell softly to the ground. The next spring, when William was 10 years old, a poster appeared on the school notice board. "Conker World Championships this autumn. Trophy and £1,000 cash first prize. Entry free." A crowd had gathered around the poster. To say William was excited was a great understatement. In fact, he was instantly most desperate to take part. The end.